And this is when it all began for us. So this is when they had started mapping out this particular war, some 17 years ago. So here we go. Chris Ernesto, he writes, give him the regular link, Aki, if you don't mind, the global research link. Can you give him that as well? 1 second, Ezekiel, it will be coming your way, but for the sake of time, we're going to continue. Chris Ernesto writes from the Global Research, Toda Aki, it's all about maintaining the U.S. position as the world's sole superpower. Why would the United States run the risk of siding with anti-Semitic neo-Nazis in Ukraine? One of the keys may be found by looking back at Zbigniew Brzezinski's 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard, in which he wrote, quote, Ukraine, a new and important space on the Eurasian chessboard, is a geopolitical pivot because its very existence as an independent country helps to transform Russia. Without Ukraine, Russia ceases to be a Eurasian empire. End quote. Pause. Can someone tell me, about 2 weeks ago, I went over an article, what empire came from the Ukraine region in Crimea that we are historically, let's think of historically, what empire came from the Ukraine/Crimean region? Let's think like what? 6th, 7th, 8th century. Toda Aki, the Khazarian Empire. These are who are known today as the Ashkenazim, or the Ashkenazic European Jews. Okay? And now, if you understand what's going on, who is attacking these people? The Catholic Jesuit Nazis. Mosiah, can you pick that up, please? Where are you at?
Yeah.
Can you get that?
Where is it? Where is it?
But this is a very... Over there. Mosiah's picking it up. Look, get it right there.
Stop!
Don't holler, Mosiah. Stop hollering. Just pick it up. Sleek eye. But this is a very intriguing tale. See the glass? There's glass right over there, too. There's glass that is unfolding before our very eyes. Not to say that the Ashkenazic Jews are the chosen people or anything, but this strategy, this plan, put the glass in first, is very clear to see once you are able to see the strategies that are taking place and why this land is being focused upon right now. Because you gotta blow the roof off the mother sometimes in order to really expose it for what it is. And this is what's happening. So here's another quote. However, if Moscow regains control over Ukraine, with its 52 million people and major resources as well as access to the Black Sea, Russia automatically regains the wherewithal to become a powerful imperial state spanning Europe and Russia. The former national security advisor to Jimmy Carter from 77 to 81 and top foreign policy advisor to present-day President Barack Obama, Brzezinski wrote that U.S. policy should be unapologetic in perpetuating America's own dominant position for at least a generation and preferably longer still. So this is what they call the new plan for the American century, okay? Brzezinski delved into the importance of little-known Ukraine by explaining in his 97 book, Geopolitical Pivots are the states whose importance is derived not from their power and motivation, but rather from their sensitive location, which in some cases gives them a special role in either defining access to important areas or in denying resources to a significant player. Yes, indeed. This is the Western branch of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so all this here, these Turks, these Mongols, all these different people here are coming back to surface, and they are very barbarian and warlike in their ways. Ukraine, Azerbaijan, South Korea, Turkey, and Iran play the role of critically important geopolitical pivots. He wrote in The Grand Chessboard, a book viewed by many as a blueprint for U.S. world domination. Also, let's keep in mind the Palladian Rite. Okay, the first war was to rid Russia of its Tsarist Roman Orthodox influence and create a communist secular state. Okay, now Russia is coming back to the forefront. They were thinking that was going to completely cripple Russia. But now we're seeing this come back full circle to a head, okay? So Brzezinski wrote that Eurasia is the chessboard on which the struggle for global primacy continues to be played, and that it is imperative that no Eurasian challenger emerges capable of dominating Eurasia and thus also of challenging America. Masai, stay here. Understanding Brzezinski's long-term view of Ukraine makes it easier to comprehend why the U.S. has given $5 billion to Ukraine since '91, and why today it is hyper concerned about having Ukraine remain in its sphere of influence. It may also help explain why in the past year the U.S. and many of its media outlets have feverishly demonized Vladimir Putin by prominently highlighting the mistreatment of activist group Pussy Riot, incessantly condemning Russia's regressive position on gay rights, and excessively focusing on substandard accommodations at the Sochi Olympic Games. The Obama administration has cleverly distracted the public from delving into U.S. support of the ultra-nationalist, neo-Nazi factions of the Ukrainian opposition, and has made it palatable for Americans to accept the U.S. narrative on Ukraine. Interestingly enough, it was Brzezinski who first compared Putin to Hitler in a March 3rd Washington Post editorial. Hillary Clinton followed up the next day with her comments comparing the two, followed by John McCain and Marco Rubio, who on March 5th agreed with Clinton's comments comparing Putin to Hitler. Apparently, Brzezinski still continues to influence U.S. political speak. And the hypocrisy of that is ridiculous, because you have to see how it is America who is more Hitler-inspired and Hitler-esque. It's crazy. In his book, Brzezinski contends that America stands supreme in the four decisive domains of global power: militarily, economically, technologically, and culturally. While this may have been accurate in '97, it can be argued that today, other than militarily, the U.S. no longer reigns supreme in these domains. So late last year, when Ukraine now ousted President Viktor Yanukovych, surprisingly canceled plans for Ukrainian integration into the European Union in favor of stronger ties with Russia, the U.S. may have viewed Ukraine as slipping even further out of its reach. At that point, with the pieces already in place, the U.S. moved to support the ousting of Yanukovych, as evidenced by the leaked phone conversations between U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Pyatt. When peaceful protests were not effective in unseating Yankovic, the violence of the ultra-nationalist Svoboda Party and right sector was embraced, if not supported, by the West. In today's Ukraine, the U.S. runs the risk of being affiliated with anti-Semitic neo-Nazis. They don't run the risk. They are outright with them. A prospect it probably feels can be controlled via a friendly Western media propaganda. But even if the risk is high, the U.S. likely views it as necessary given the geopolitical importance of Ukraine, as Brzezinski mapped it out in 1997. So you can see these plans well underway, and they go back much further than that. You have to understand that with even Giuseppe Mazzini, Otto von Bismarck, and Albert Pike, all these plans were well in place prior to World War I. So all these things that we're seeing flesh out today is a very well thought out plan. So we're taking a Western view at it. Let's see what Russia's little stance is on this matter. So let's go to this next article from the Trumpet. The name of the article is entitled Iran, Russia's Trump Card. For us who play cards, particularly spades, we know what Trump cards are, right? I mean, this is cards that take over the game. So this could be a game changer, a complete game changer. And what the powerful perspective, I'll use that word, of this article is that this is all prophetic. And if we're not seeing the prophetic alignment of these current events before it's taking place, we're not seeing anything. So hopefully this article will provide you that perspective. Oh, man. So to the picture you see Vladimir Putin shaking hands with his Iranian counterpart, Hassan Rouhani, who is the president. He's replaced Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. So Moscow's relationship with Tehran gives its critical leverage over America and Europe. So here's the alignment. Let's look at this. Russia has on its side Japan, China, Iran, and I want to say Turkey. So these countries are aligning with Russia. And if we are not seeing these alignments prophetically, again, we need to take a deeper look. Oh, and India. Wow, India. Not only Turkey, but India. So let's get into this. So the trumpet recently highlighted the prophetic significance of the support China, India, and even Japan are giving Russia as it confronts Europe and America over Ukraine. The BRICS, huh? That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and who's the S? That's not Spain. I forgot who the S is. South Africa. I was going to say that. Interesting. Toda Aki. But Moscow is solidifying friendships beyond Asia, and one in particular bears close attention. This is Russia's relationship with Iran. First, recall how much diplomatic energy Europe and America have invested in recent months in improving relations with Tehran in the hope of securing a permanent peace agreement. America's president has worked especially hard to placate Tehran. As his presidency winds down and with his domestic policies flailing, Barack Obama wants to go down in history as the man who negotiated peace between the U.S. and its most implacable enemy. Although it's a pipe dream, securing a deal with Iran is one of the Obama administration's chief foreign policy ambitions. Today, after months and years of compromise and capitulation, America and Europe, the P5+1, are on the cusp. At least this is what Tehran has led them to believe, of securing what they believe to be a historic deal with Iran. After a preliminary deal struck last November in Geneva, the PS+1 anticipates a fully fledged deal over the next few months. That is, unless Vladimir Putin doesn't strike first. Russia's relationship with Iran is complex. The Kremlin isn't thrilled about the idea of a nuclear Islamist state to its south, or Iran's sponsorship of Islamist terrorists in Russia's periphery, particularly in the Caucasus. On the other hand, befriending America's enemy provides certain benefits, chief of which is significant leverage over Washington. And as Western efforts to punish Putin for his behavior in Ukraine mount, the Kremlin is seeking leverage by revitalizing its friendship with Iran. In February, Iran's ambassador to Russia announced that the two nations were working on an oil for goods deal. Under the deal, Iran will send 500,000 barrels of oil a day to Russia in return for Russian goods and even Russian help building nuclear power plants. On March 12, Iran's official news agency reported that Russia had agreed to build 2 new 1,000 megawatt nuclear power stations. These will be in addition to the Bushehr facility, which Russia also built. The reports made no mention of how much oil Iran would be sending to Russia in exchange. But as of last October, Iran was exporting 800,000 barrels of crude oil per day, down from nearly 2.5 million in 2011. Selling another roughly 500,000 barrels to Russia would be a big deal, almost doubling its oil exports. For Tehran, the addition of a couple of extra nuclear power plants is always a good thing too. Russia's support of Iran dilutes Western efforts to marginalize Tehran and reduces the incentive of Iran to negotiate with the West. The deal with Iran hasn't been finalized, so there's plenty of time for Russia to back down if the West concedes in Ukraine. But Moscow's timely dalliance with Iran is a clear warning to America and Europe, a reminder that the Kremlin has the power to tank Western negotiations with Iran. America has gotten the message too. We all hope that the incredibly difficult situation in Ukraine will not create issues for this Iranian negotiation, a U.S. official told Reuters on March 14. We hope that whatever happens in the days ahead, whatever actions that we in the international community take, depending upon the decisions and the choices that Russia makes, that any actions that Russia subsequently takes will not put the negotiations at risk, he said. Gary Samore, a former White House coordinator for arms control, recently warned that just the disunity between Russia and the rest of the negotiating team could lead to at least the appearance, if not the reality, of disarray within the P5+1. Iran could find this disconcerting and make them feel more able to walk away from the nuclear negotiations, he said. This isn't to say that Western negotiations with Iran depend on support from Russia. The Kremlin has never been a genuine supporter of negotiations with Tehran. However, America and Europe do require the Kremlin to be aloof from negotiations and willing to leave Iran alone to negotiate. An active Russian-Iran axis with the Kremlin actively supporting Tehran and gaining influence in the process would complicate peace negotiations enormously. Russia and Iran are formidable foes individually, but a serious alignment between the two would be a nightmare. Buying oil for Iran is only the start of what Russia could do. For example, back in 2010, Russia agreed to sell Iran an S-300 air defense system. Moscow pocketed Iran's cash but never delivered the goods. It could change that now. Giving Iran one of the world's best surface-to-air missiles would make an attack on Iran much more difficult. It's possible Russia's relationship with Iran may be part of the reason Washington hasn't responded more aggressively to Putin's belligerence in Ukraine. Is the Obama administration more concerned about peace with Iran than with America's treaties with Ukraine or confronting Russia? The actor to watch in all this is Europe. Europe doesn't have the breathing room that America has with Iran and Russia. The continent isn't separated from either power by massive oceans. Europe has significant financial and energy assets at stake in both Russia, Iran, and Russia. Europe is within range of Iran's ballistic missiles, and Islamist terrorists are embedded throughout the continent. For example, the behavior of the regimes in Moscow and Tehran are of supreme importance, and the idea of them working together against Europe is deeply concerning. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shows that the Kremlin does not respect the sovereign borders in Eastern Europe. Europeans are well aware of their history with Russia and what can happen when either side doesn't respect their borders with one another. For Germany and Europe, responding to Russia, at the very least showing itself capable of displaying equal power and force, isn't a luxury. It is a necessity, and one it will have to fulfill soon. From the outset of the crisis in Ukraine, the trumpet has warned that Europe is the place to watch. The dramatic developments in Ukraine are forcing the continent to address its many issues and figure out a way to coalesce into a force capable of confronting Russia, Iran, and other crises coming its way. Separately, Iran and Russia already deeply concern Europe. You can be sure the development of a more significant axis between these two will intensify Europe's anxieties and increase the pressure on Europe's leaders to create the Catholic-inspired, German-led, united European superpower that we have long forecast. Ezekiel 37. This is what we have to read to contextualize all this, okay? This is these jaws, these hooks being put into these jaws and drawn to this conflict of conflagration that is going to spark the world and is going to usher in this battle that we know as Armageddon. Okay, so all this here, very much so Palladian right, the third war, which would be between particularly the Zionists and the Islamic powers. So this is an article. I'm gonna interject this, Aki. This is an article here that I want to share as well, and then I'll have one last article. So when you get this article, please do me the favor of pressing 4, because this is another contention that we have to look at. We've seen the Catholic side. We're getting into the Islamic side, but we have to look at the Zionist side as well. So this is an article from Zero Hedge. All right. So we've taken a look at the side of Christendom. We got a glimpse into the side of the Islamic side. Now we're going to take a look at the Zionist side of this matter. So when you get this article, please press 4. This is an article entitled Netanyahu Orders Israel Army to Prepare for Possible Military Strike Against Iran in 2014. This is by Tyler Durden, Fight Club's very own. This is a Zero Hedge from Zero Hedge. But Tyler Durden's name comes from the movie Fight Club, which Brad Pitt played a part of, which was a very anarchist type of movie. Interesting in its own right. So the article reads, back in 2013, it was Syria where the world was gearing for imminent military action after a relentless series of false flag provocations by the United States intent on securing a Qatar gas pipeline to Europe, which in the last minute was deftly defused by who else than Vladimir Putin. So now the Ukraine, you have to understand, is a huge pipeline to Europe as well. Russia, being one of the major suppliers of oil to Europe, has majority of its oil going through the Ukraine. So this is another matter that we read about in these past weeks about this situation. So after a prolonged campaign orchestrated by Victoria Nuland, we read her name, and the U.S. Department again, which succeeded in the now traditional violent coup, see Egypt and Libya, once again saw Putin victorious after yesterday's annexation of the all-important Crimean Peninsula. So this was earlier this week, which was achieved without the firing of one shot. So now that Putin has succeeded in trouncing the U.S. twice in a row, it is time to poke some old, well-known geopolitical wounds, such as Iran. So now there you see Russia coiling with Iran, prophetically. And so now the West is putting its eyes back on Iran. And who better to do it than Israel? Whereas Haaretz reports Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon have ordered the army to continue preparing for a possible military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities at a cost of at least 10 billion shekels, which is $2.89 billion this year, despite the talks between Iran and the West, according to recent statements by senior military officers. To be more sure, there is a tangible benefit for all those involved. More war means more military spending, means more broken windows, means more gross domestic product. 3 Knesset members who were present at Knesset Joint Committee hearings on Israel Defense Forces plans that were held in January and February say they learned during the hearings that 10 billion shekels to 12 billion shekels of the defense budget would be allocated this year for preparations for a strike on Iran, approximately the same amount that was allocated in 2013. Yet unlike the U.S., where warmongering has become an art, if not a science, in Israel, these things are taken far more seriously. Messiah, no. The IDF representatives and the army had received a clear directive from government officials from the political echelon, meaning Netanyahu and Ya'alon, to continue readying for a possible independent strike by Israel on the Iranian nuclear sites, regardless of the talks now happening between Iran and the West, the 3 MKs said. As for the diplomatic cover for a potential attack, it is well known, and the same one used for the past 3 years, attack Iran before it can nuke Israel and obliterate it from the face of the earth. Ever since the interim accord between Iran and the 6 powers was reached, Netanyahu had stressed that Israel will not consider itself bound by it. In the last few weeks, as talks on a permanent accord have resumed, Netanyahu has upped his rhetoric on the Iranian issue and is again making implied threats about a possible unilateral Israeli strike on the Iranian nuclear sites. My friends, I believe that letting Iran enrich uranium would open up the floodgates, Netanyahu said at the AIPAC conference earlier this month. That must not happen, and we will make sure it does not happen. Ironically, this time Israel may see pushback from none other than the U.S. itself, which mysteriously over the past 6 months has transformed itself from Iran's most hated enemy to a willing partner who sees Iran as nothing short of a frontier market, not a mentioned source of natural resources. However, the U.S. too realizes that it needs military outs, with Ukraine seemingly defused for the time being. which is why yesterday, a few hours after Russia peacefully annexed Crimea, the U.S. made its feeble response known when it suspended operations of the Syrian embassy in Washington and its consulates and told diplomats and staff who are not U.S. citizens or permanent residents to leave the country. The justification of this oddly timed move came from the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, Daniel Rubinstein, who said that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad had refused to step down and was responsible for atrocities against Syrians. And this was news to the U.S., more from Reuters. We have determined it as unacceptable for individuals appointed by that regime to conduct diplomatic or consular operations in the United States, said Rubinstein. For real?
It was the only thing.
Whose appointment was announced by the State Department on Monday. Consequently, the U.S. notified the Syrian government today that it must immediately suspend operations of its embassy in Washington, D.C., and its honorary consulates in Troy, Michigan, and Houston, Texas, he said in a statement. In other words, the U.S. tried to impose its moral superiority codex on yet another country, which for all intents and purposes was a proxy of Russian strength in the Middle East, i.e., punish the Kremlin by kicking out Syria. Surely, Putin was in tears. Sarcasm, of course. The only problem is that it is now beyond obvious to virtually everyone in the world that the framework of Pax Americana is only applicable to the increasingly self-deluded United States and, of course, the group of 7 most insolvent nations whose debt Ponzi schemes are ever more reliant on a centrally planned regime of low interest rates and free money. For everyone else, it is now just as obvious that when provoked, the best the U.S. can do is simply impose some sanctions and shut down embassies while it prints trillions of dollars in paper wealth each year, of course. Very interesting to see these developments unfolding before our very eyes. Intense, to say the least. But let's take a look at, speaking of Eastern views, Iran. What's Iran saying about all this? The last article I'm presenting today is from the Daily Caller. This is the last article that I'm going to present, and I'll just add a few reflections of it, of the entirety of the matter, and then release the mic to the next presenter. The name of the article is called Leading Iranian Ayatollah. This is the religious perspective, because, you know, Iran is a theocratic republic. The Islamic Messiah will behead Western leaders. Now, Yah has a plan for all this, and that's something we have to understand. And if we're familiar with Jehoshaphat and the Valley of Decision and the battle in which all these nations were encroached around Jerusalem, who did Yah use to destroy these armies? But the armies themselves. So let's take a look at this. The Daily Caller, Raza Khalili, he writes, a leading Ayatollah of Iran's Islamic regime is promising that Western leaders will be executed by the Islamic Messiah, the state-owned media outlet Mer News reported Saturday. So this is about a week old. When Imam Zaman Mahdi, the last Shiite Imam, comes, he will behead the Western leaders, warned Ayatollah Mohammad Imami Kashani, the interim Friday prayer leader of Tehran and a member of the Assembly of Experts, the body that chooses the supreme leader. However, Imam will not harm the oppressed nations, he said. The Shiite clerical establishment in Iran believes that at the end of time, the 12th Imam, Mahdi, a 9th century prophet, will appear, listen to this, with Jesus Christ at his side, kill all the infidels, and raise the flag of Islam in all corners, 4 corners of the world. A video revealed in 2011, The Coming is Upon Us, which is one of the videos that Ahmadinejad had, but it showed regime intentions, change in the Middle East, destruction of Israel, and the coming of Mahdi. The video produced by the regime was to be distributed in the Middle East. There's a video you can take a look at. It's about 30 minutes long. Kashani compared the Western leaders as tag rags and criticized Europe's foreign policy chief, Catherine Ashton, for her recent visit to Tehran in which she met with female dissidents. The purpose of Ashton's visit was to discuss with regime officials the ongoing negotiations over Iran's illicit nuclear program. However, in a sign of support for human rights, she met with several dissidents. They come to Iran, and in the name of human rights, they meet with this and that, Kashani said. However, they commit the most heinous crimes in the region and the world. UN human rights officials recently raised an alarm about violence against women, torture, and at the pace of execution in Iran. In 2.5 months of this year alone, 176 people have been hanged. Meanwhile, the chief commander of the regime's Quds forces, General Qasem Soleimani, has called the Islamic Republic the only country capable of leading the Islamic world. This is them dragons, Zaki. You're exactly right. From a long time ago, countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan claimed leadership of the Islamic world and tried very hard in that pursuit, but none of these countries, except Iran, is capable of accepting this great responsibility, Soleimani said. None of these countries is able to lead the Islamic world due to two key elements: support of fighters in Islamic movements and defense of Muslims and Islam in the face of aggression on the Islamic world. Soleimani called for the fall of Quds, Jerusalem, in 1967, the 0 point of the Islamic world in its weakness, and boasted of Iran's power today and how it has changed the equation of power in the region and the world. Soleimani had previously stated that President Barack Obama was not after regime change, but only because the U.S. can't topple Iran. America in the last 35 years has committed the most cowardly and worst practices against the Islamic Republic, he said. After his speech, the outlet of the Quds cyber forces officers posted an image of Obama wearing a Nazi field marshal's uniform and surrendering with his hands on his head. The caption reads, "In the not too distant future, one General Qasem Soleimani is enough for all the enemies of this country." Soleimani, called by a former CIA officer the most powerful operative in the Middle East today, directs all terrorist activities of the Islamic regime throughout the world and commands much of the behind-the-scenes operations in Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria to protect the Assad regime. And this is from a former CIA operative who is known as a pseudonym or a pen name, Reza Khalili. But it's interesting to note when you really take a look at this, again, these alignments that are taking place, in addition to Obama's peace accord to divide the land of Jerusalem, and another Islamic figure saying that all Jews are supposed to be brought to Israel for their extermination. So all these things are surrounding, but we know, according to Scripture, that Yah has a plan in all this. So all these forces and these hissings are taking place, but this is why you have to be studied up, listen to what words are coming from the Holy Land, and understand the importance of the borders that Yah has given for his salvation to be revealed and manifest. This is what our Room Hebrew Vision is about, to provide this insight. This information is not to provide fear